Sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. Today we're going to talk about the wins and learns about developing a leadership pipeline in our church and in our organization. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us for today's leadership podcast through the Harvest Network. My name is Denz. My wife and I have the honor of pastoring Souls Church, in the great state of Minnesota, and the honor of serving on our leadership team here at the Harvest Network, where we are committed to doing life and ministry together. And we are so glad to join with you today to, for a few minutes, pass on some nuggets that we have learned as I have been this year unpacking how to develop and launch a leadership pipeline in your church, in your ministry, with your team. Today, I'm excited to actually go back and kind of revisit a workshop that my wife Dana and I did this past summer at the annual assembly for the Harvest Network in Pennsylvania. And we did this topic called how to build a resilient leadership pipeline. And for a few minutes today, I want to talk about how you can help build a resilient leadership pipeline. Leadership pipeline is this. It's an intentional process to develop and disciple leaders to lead like Jesus. Now, let me pause for a moment because I think churches and ministries have two types of discipleships. You know, there are believer discipleships where we train and disciple believers to live like Jesus. But a discipleship for leaders trains believers to lead like Jesus. And I think churches and ministries are good at training believers to live like Jesus. And we have a lot of things down for that and ways that we do it. But do ministries and churches today have a development system for leaders to lead like Jesus? Does your ministry have that? Does your organization have that? Well, today we're going to talk about wins and learns that we have had regarding launching a leadership discipleship program, a pipeline in our church so people can learn how to lead like Jesus. You see, my wife and I have a quote that we use often. Our church does as well. Our leadership team does. I invite you to adopt it as well. And it is this: sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. But most of the time, you do both. Every single week in our church and ministry, our teams pause and we look at wins and learns from that service, from that meeting, from an event, from something that we hosted, and it always helps us be better. Because sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. But the reality is, everybody, most of the time, you and I do both. And so this past summer at the annual assembly, my wife and I taught the wins and learns of developing and launching a leadership pipeline, an intentional process for developing leaders in our church and ministry to lead like Jesus. And for a few moments today, I want to teach you those wins and learns. I think winning and learning is so important. You know, Proverbs chapter 1, verse 5 says that we should let the wise hear and increase in learning. And the one who understands should obtain guidance. So today, I want to help us, if you will, increase in learning, obtain some guidance. Again, I'm not a pro at this. I don't have it all figured out, but I every week am winning and learning when it comes to our leadership pipeline. Our number one, it is to have tasks before title. What do I mean by that? As you're starting to notice people that have leadership potential, you maybe notice they have a call on their life or they have a desire to get involved in a bigger way. Before you give them the title of being a leader or a coach or a director, give them a task and allow them to develop faithfulness. Because faithfulness will develop fruitfulness. And it'll give you a chance to evaluate their character, their competencies, their faithfulness, their fruitfulness, before you give them a title that carries bigger responsibility, bigger influence, a bigger platform. And here's the thing we've learned. In the very beginning, we began to get people plugged in and gave them the title, so we, with a good heart, had our leadership pipeline developed. But we realized very quickly on, before we bring more on, let's give them tasks, allow them to be faithful, allow them to ask questions, allow them to grow, allow that faithfulness to bring fruitfulness, and allow them to grow into the position that we saw them leading. And there's a lot of pros to that, but I want to tell you, we learned as a team, our win and our learn was don't give people a title until you've seen them do the tasks. The Bible says, be faithful in the little, God will make you ruler over much. So I want to encourage you, a win and learn we've had in developing a resilient leadership pipeline is giving tasks before title. You'll thank me for it. Second win and learn that we shared, my wife and I did at the annual assembly, was less is more. What we mean by that is don't feel like you have to have a ton of leaders in your church to make a big impact. All it takes is one leader being developed to start, and then another leader, and then another leader. One mistake we made and we learned is that we mapped out our whole leadership pipeline and what we ideally would need to run effectively in the long run. And then we began to put names and people to that, and we thought as we get people in these positions, they will just naturally begin to develop. But what we learned is sometimes people are maybe not in that season of development yet. Maybe they haven't had the opportunity to grow into the leadership giftings, or maybe they haven't had the chance to develop certain competencies that it will take to be an effective leader. And what we learned is that it's okay to have less leaders that you can develop into greater leaders. The biggest pro to having less is more is this. It will allow you to duplicate yourself one leader at a time or two leaders at a time. And then when that leader is developed, you turn around and say, now your job is to develop the next leader. And when you have less leaders in the beginning, you can start duplicating yourself in a way that is sustainable, more fruitful, and less of a wear and tear on your pace on what you need to do. And here's the thing we've learned. In the beginning, it's better to have less, and it's going to be greater to have those that you can develop. So in the long run, you can have more of the kind of leaders you want to have. Don't try to fill every slot. It's okay to have 3 on your leadership team. Then it's okay to grow to 4, and then 5, and then build from there at the pace that you and your leaders are able to sustain. All right, win and learn number 3, consistent culture. Consistent culture is key. I want to encourage you, you're going to build a culture that absolutely speaks your values. Let me say it this way. Whatever your culture is, what's unspoken of, what is allowed, what is the environment for development, you need to continue to speak that. So here would be number 3. Number 3, have a consistent culture of leadership development. The beautiful thing with ministries is that you can constantly pivot and make changes. I think it's important to constantly, consistently talk about the culture of leadership development. And last month in the leadership podcast, I talked about how to create a leadership development culture. However you are developing and creating that culture, I want to encourage you, continue to be consistent with it, talk about it, bring it up at every leadership meeting. Don't talk about it in June and then not talk about it until November. You need to be consistent with your culture. And the culture you want to create, if you're going to have a leadership pipeline, is one of constantly talking about leadership development. Be consistent. Every one-on-one with your leaders, every leadership meeting, pop it into your messages. The terminology, the culture is more caught than taught. Number 4, we learned that we need to keep it in front of others often. Here's a little bit of a blend from the last one. Whatever your culture is, be sure that you keep it in front of people. You're talking with people about it. You're constantly communicating it. You're constantly just modeling it in so many ways. And as you do that, you will keep it in front of people. One example is that whenever we go and are part of retreats or conferences, or we go to lunches with other pastors, or we have events going on at the church or at the ministry, we rarely do it ourselves. We're always inviting others to come and be part of what ministry is with us. Why do we do that? When we allow others to be part of ministry, it will keep it in front of others. And what you want to be in front of others is a leadership pipeline culture. Here's the thing, everybody. Your church and your ministry is watching you, and what you keep in front of them and what you share over and over again, they are going to catch, and it's going to get down into their spirit. Years ago, I worked for a retail store, and the retail store that I worked at, I did training in. I trained new hires. I trained teenagers on their first job and other things. And it was a known statistic that most new hires need to hear something 7 to 9 times before they catch it, before they remember it, before they do it. We need to remember as ministry leaders, we got to keep things in front of people 7 to 9 times before they start catching it and before even a leadership pipeline culture is developed in your organization. All right, last win and learn from us at the annual assembly was use a solid roadmap. You can't be coming up with a different roadmap every week. You can't be just, it's fine to use what you've learned in the past, but your leadership team, as you're developing a pipeline, need to know the plan. They need to know what the roadmap is for them to be developed. The Bible says God is a God of order. So for our ministry, we have chosen to use the pipeline that Mac Lake has put together. We have chosen to use the Leadership Pipeline series by Mac Lake. It starts with a great one called the multiplication effect. This is a great one that we have used. Then it goes through a whole series of leadership development curriculum, starting with leading yourself and then leading others and then leading leaders and then last but not least, leading a department. And this series has become very helpful for our roadmap. And again, it starts with team and group members, then it goes to group leaders and coordinators and directors and executives. And here's the thing, what does it do? It allows, we've learned, that if we are always coming up with our own lesson, but the team doesn't know what is beyond this lesson, they're only going to go as far as they know the roadmap is leading them. They're going to be able to exceed expectations when they know what the expectations are. So we highly encourage you, use a roadmap. And the one that, as a Harvest Network, that we have come to know real well and have endorsed is the Mac Lake Leadership Pipeline Training. It's a great discipling leadership series that we truly do believe will be a help wherever you are in your ministry and organizational development. I want to encourage you, take these 5 wins and learns that we have had to build a resilient leadership pipeline. And today I want you to take a moment as you turn off this podcast or as it wraps up to ask yourself right now, What are some of the wins and learns that you have seen as you have begun to develop a leadership pipeline in your organization? What has worked? What has not worked? And what do you need to do next to develop a resilient leadership pipeline in your ministry, church, or organization? And I believe when we do this as a network, our ministries will be stronger. The people we lead will become developed to be faithful and fruitful. And as ministries that are reaching this generation for Jesus Christ, we will develop leaders that are first class, that not only know how to live like Jesus, but we will develop ministers to lead like Jesus. Take your wins, take your learns, and here's the challenge. Every week, just keep getting better. Thank you so much for taking time to invest in your leadership development and your leadership journey. I'm confident that as you continue to plant seeds in this area, your leaders will thank you, your ministries will be sustained, and you will see a bigger fruitful impact for what God has called you to do in your generation. Thank you for taking time to invest in your leadership. And on behalf of the entire Harvest Network, thank you so much. God bless.